Good day, everyone. I'm your moderator, Lee Judge, and welcome to today's webinar entitled People First, Omnichannel for Customers and Agents, brought to you by Jacada. As a note, to honor the privacy of our attendees, only your name will appear in the attendee window. Our presenters today are Sheila McGee-Smith, President and Principal Analyst of McGee-Smith Analytics, and David Holmes, AVP Omnichannel Solutions at Jacada. Today, we will introduce you to the ways and techniques of providing a more efficient and competitive agent experience, how to reduce customer effort, and how to develop strategies for digital transformation. Also, at the end of the presentation, there will be an interactive poll in which you can give your feedback, and the poll results will be discussed during the question and answer session. For the Q&A session, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A window at any time during the event. Again, to honor the privacy of our attendees, only your name will appear in the attendee window. So let's begin.
So our topic today, David and Lee, people first, omnichannel for customers and agents. If you know anything about Jacada, you know that a lot of their business centers on creating great tools for agents. And I think sometimes the conversation around omnichannel and the customer loses sight of that. So we're going to bring agents right into the center of the conversation as we talk about the broader trends that are happening in the customer experience marketplace. So from a very top-down perspective, the times they are changing. What am I referring to? One thing is that the democratization of information technology, with consumers being so much more familiar with the various types of technology, carrying technology around with them. One of the things that we're finding is that business departments are making their own decisions about technology very often. And we've got shadow IT efforts taking place all over the business. I think one of the things that happens with that is agents get lost in a variety of different data sources and applications. And I think one of the things that we're finding with the complexity of channels that customers are coming to a contact center with, that perhaps the time has come to tie those and groom those data sources and applications perhaps in a better way than we have been doing for the last few years. The other thing about times are changing. Regardless of what vertical market your business operates in, there's been huge impacts from technology. Probably the first was retailing, changing so dramatically with the takeoff of Amazon services. Hospitality now, completely changing with Airbnb. The taxi business, changing with with Uber. I was recently in San Francisco, which is, the home of Uber and a place where, there's more Uber drivers than probably Starbucks, and that's saying a lot. And I read in the local paper that the yellow cab company in San Francisco was failing and perhaps near bankruptcy as a result of this shift in behavior to more technically savvy and technically easier to use solution that Uber has created. The most recent sort of a business that I see changing, if you have any dogs, and my husband and I have 4 Labradors, there's a company called Rover.com, which can match people who need pet sitters with pet sitters, and it's the same kind of thing as Uber and Airbnb. Times are changing. We in the customer experience world have to change with it, both in terms of how those interactions are coming in and handling them in a great way, but also in terms of how we are equipping agents to handle this new world. So one of the measures of how the world is changing is the shift from voice interactions to digital interactions. And a great source of data is a company called Dimension Data, who has been doing something they call the Contact Center Benchmarking Report since 2006. So the great thing about this data is it's been taken over time, over the last 10 years. And what we're seeing here is a graphic from the 2015 report that came out last year. And you can't see those little boxes and you can't see those little colors. But what I want to sort of present to you is look at the inside circle and see the proportion of green. So, and for St. Patty's Day. The green represents either voice, calls, or IVR. And in 2006, that was a very large part of the total circle. The gray there was, the beginnings of email, the pink, the beginnings of, website interactions. But in 2006, we could safely say that 90% of all interactions were still coming in voice. Forward to 2013, and you see the green shrinking, right? You see the other colors, the other pieces of the pie growing in importance. You see email growing. You see SMS growing. To the point where in 2015, that last circle out, 35% of interactions are digital interactions. They're not voice interactions. Let me throw it to David, because I think you had a comment that you wanted to make here.
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Sheila. And I guess this trend isn't too surprising, certainly with all of the digital options we have to interact with companies today. But what we see across our customers and talking to our partners is, even with all this digital interaction, the size of the contact centers themselves in terms of the number of folks employed there really isn't changing much. And in fact, in some cases, we've actually seen it increase. What is that because they're also having to deal with these digital interactions?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's interesting. I think even until a couple of years ago, one could safely say that voice interactions, the number of voice interactions was not declining. I think we finally are seeing that. We're crossing that chasm. Right. But a lot of these interactions still require live agents. Web chat does. Email, you still have to answer it. SMS, yep. Video chat. So just because it's not voice doesn't mean that there's not a live agent involved. And just because it's not voice doesn't mean that it's not contact center technology that has to be tightly integrated into the contact center software and the context of it made available to an agent. So even if somebody has proactively sent an SMS message and presumably no agent interaction, right? If the person has a question on that and dials into the company, whatever it is, we still want that agent to have it. So it still all has to be tied together well.
Right. No, I guess that makes perfect sense. Do you see that, I guess I would expect that the easier types of inquiries or service requests would be handled through digital channels. The more complex type requests are still probably going to funnel through to the agent. Do you see a trend where the types of calls the agents are taking are becoming more complex, or at least the percentage of calls they're taking are more complex than they were?
Well, you know what? We're going to come back to that later in the webinar. So I'm going to table that for now. How's that?
Perfect. It's perfect.
Okay, and move on to my next slide. Also from the Dimension Data report from 2015. And so what they're saying, this is a great graphical depiction of the change over time. So in 2006, 5-6% of interactions coming into a contact center were digital. By 2008, 2 years later, a really large jump to, north of 25%. It's interesting to see the sort of flattening of the curve in 2009 and 2011 as we went through a global downturn. I should mention that this data is global data. Dimension Data interviews about 1,000 contact center management executives across all of the global regions of the world. So, an equal number of Americans, Europeans, Asians, Australians comprise this data set. So moving on from 2009 and 2011, where we didn't see it jumping quite as quickly as we come out of the recession, we see that last year's data, 2015, showing just about 48% of interactions are digital, and that the prediction that they were making in was that by the end of 2016, that chasm would cross, that more than half of the interactions would be digital and not voice. By the way, the new report, the 2016 report, is coming out April 5th from Dimension Data, and I have had early access to that, presented some of those results last week at Enterprise Connect, and the curve continues to go in this direction, and they are still predicting that in 2016 we will see that crossover. So, I think what's interesting is we went through the 2009 almost to 2012 period. Even though things were slowly moving more digitally, there wasn't this sense of urgency on the part of companies to do something about it. I think we saw, perhaps a little bit slower than we should have a realization that this was going on. I think, 2015, 2016, we are seeing a real recognition by companies that we need to do this digital transformation. The same digital transformation that's happening throughout the company is obviously impacting the contact center as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's driven by primarily competitive pressures or pressures from the consumers that this is the way they want to interact? Or both, I guess.
Both,
yeah.
Right? So we've got the consumers with the mobile devices, we'll talk about that in a little bit, and just having access to all of those digital channels essentially 24/7. But then we see these new business models driving competition at the same time. So those same cab drivers that are competing with Uber, much more often now, I will get a driver who will email me a receipt. One of the benefits of Uber being passed through, to other types of driving services because they understand that there's value in that to the consumer. So I think, to your point, I think both of those pressures are going on.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So as I move to this next data, as I try to, this is from a company called a group called the CFI Group. It is a research and consulting group that grew out of the University of Michigan. It is responsible for something you may have heard of, the American Consumer Satisfaction Index, that measures, U.S. citizens, satisfaction with the contact center experiences that they have. And this data came out in 2015, and I find it really supports this notion of we haven't done as well supporting agents and consumers with our digital channels. So if you look at, self-service on the web, we're doing a pretty good job as a contact center industry with first call resolution, 78%. If someone calls on the phone, 65% first call resolution. That's a pretty good success rate. But if you look at online chat and if you look at email, those are falling below what consumers really should be able to expect. Less than 50% getting first call resolution.
Is any one of these channels trending faster than the others, or what have you seen in trends in these channels over the past few years?
So if you think about it, when email first started coming into the contact center, we as an industry were doing really badly, right? That's when the Wall Street Journal articles were coming out that said, you could send 100 emails to companies and you might get 2 responses in a week.
Right. Yep.
So I think we're trending in the right direction. I just don't think we've done enough yet. And we'll talk about, I think, some of the things that can help boost that first call resolution.
Okay.
So what we're going to talk about next is some of the things that are happening in the contact center in 2016. Some of the trends that, as you understand them, will help you support both your customers and your agents, perhaps better than we are today. And we'll talk about customer journey and what exactly that means. We'll talk about how mobile is changing things. We'll talk about the agent journey. It's not just about a customer journey, but the one the agent is on as well. We will close out talking about the Internet of Things, something that may seem very far off and perhaps is not as far off as we might imagine. And then we'll talk a little bit about cloud alternatives for a lot of these, and what the cloud means in terms of delivering this customer experience and agent experience. So customer journey management, starts as a philosophy. What do I mean there? I did a speech in October to a contact center user group, and the title of my talk was Customer Journey Management. It's a 12-step process. And one can, as I did, map out 12 different steps that get you closer to thinking of things in a customer journey way. But the first step is changing the mindset that you have. think about it, for 35 years, as long as contact centers have been around, we have measured contact centers by interactions, by individual siloed interactions coming in. How fast did we answer it? Did we give it first call resolution? We haven't really thought about the journey that the customer is on and where is the customer in that journey, right? So increasingly, we know that when customers call into the contact center, it's not the first thing that they've done. You know, increasingly, it may be the fourth, the fifth, the sixth step that they have taken. And just thinking about the customers who are calling in as on a journey helps, I think, helps the company understand what does the agent need to better address the customer, and what should we be doing as a business to shorten that journey for the customer. So I think just the mindset of customer journey is a great place to start. Because, you know, as we talked about, there's a complete change in the way people buy products, people buy services, and what they expect from businesses. This death of brick and mortar means you no longer have that one-to-one relationship that helped cement a customer and their loyalty. You know, think about 20, 30 years ago, you had a relationship with somebody at the bank. You went in and cashed your check and got cash and perhaps paid bills. I know I'm not alone. I haven't been in a bank in over a year. You know, the only time I go in is somebody forces me to go in and sign something. But there's so many industries that are like that. Companies have to find new ways to build that customer loyalty because we no longer have those face-to-face relationships. And one of the ways that we can do that is by, again, equipping agents with that context. Who is this person calling in? How do we know them? How can we make them feel like there's a connection between us and them? And even if it's not a personal one, it's one between the company. You know, I feel like there's a tie between me and United Airlines. I travel quite a bit, and when the IVR answers me and says, "Hi Sheila, welcome back," that feels good. And that's the kind of thing that taking this customer journey notion and really understanding we have to build relationships will bring us. It will bring us back some of that face-to-face loyalty that we might have missed over the last few years.
Right.
You know, we talked a little bit about Amazon. We talked about the death of brick and mortar. The other thing that's going on is just the shift to the mobile device as part of the shopping experience. So this is some data from a survey of mobile consumers. 35% of shoppers who research a purchase on their mobile device expect to buy within the hour, right? Not in seconds, within the hour. I mean, you know, not within days. And those who research goods on the go are nearly twice as likely to buy that, you know, within that hour. So there's two things going on here. One is they have an incredible amount of information available as they come to the agent. Back to the point that you made earlier and that we'll touch on later about super agents, they have to be better prepared for a much more prepared consumer. But improving mobile application connectivity to the contact center is not something that's a nice to do. These statistics show that, you know, leads go cold very quickly. If we're not back to a consumer right away, if we don't respond in a timely way, they're very likely to move on to another provider because another provider is not get in your car and drive somewhere else. It's go to Google and find another provider and get to a new site. So anything you wanted to add on this, David?
No, actually, it's a great point, and I was excited to see this slide. I was just reading something came out from your good friends at Forrester Arch Solar and such. they did a report on shopping cart abandonment, retail abandonment, and I guess the corollary to this is they found that 90% of the leads, people who had abandoned online shopping carts, go cold after 1 hour. And it correlates beautifully to the points made here is that if I'm a shopper with intent and I'm on your site and I don't convert, if you haven't found a way to get me back within an hour, I've gone somewhere else. So you're right. There's a sense of urgency in getting these online and mobile shoppers.
Absolutely. Because, in effect, the smartphone has changed everything. We no longer have the luxury of saying, I support voice, and that's okay. That's enough. Because in that smartphone, all of these different channels are available. Text, email, mobile applications, the web, and also the ability, this push refers to the ability of a company to send something to that smartphone, to proactively connect with that customer. And so I think the other point I want to make before I ask for your comments, David, the other point I want to make is I think one of the things that happened over the last 10 years as we began to see email become important and get incorporated into a contact center or web chat is that companies often made an expedient decision and put in either an outsourcer or a standalone solution. I think this graphic helps illustrate that just like the customer has all of these channels in their hand simultaneously, we need to equip agents to be able to see the context of all of these channels and respond to a customer with that information. We can no longer say, oh, we have a group that does that. So let me turn it over to you, David.
No, I think that's very well said. And Sheila, as you know, just a quick note about Jacada. We've been servicing the call center and call service industry for 25 years now. And back in 2012, about 4 years ago, we introduced this notion with the advent of the smartphone buyer and customer. We introduced this notion of visual IVR. Actually, have been credited with coining that phrase, but for those of you who are in attendance that have heard the term or have been exposed to visual IVR, this is much more than putting a graphical interface on top of your typical IVR menu. It's really as the caller is calling into your IVR with their smartphone, it's recognizing the fact that the caller has a smartphone and offering them the option to engage in a digital experience. It could certainly follow the same navigation flow, but what we see most of our customers doing is taking advantage of this new digital channel to change the interaction to improve the customer experience. So they're incorporating videos, they're sharing documents, they're asking questions to help guide the customer and actually enhancing that process to the extent where they're gaining huge improvements over what they would traditionally get with our IVR in terms of call deflection or containment. But as you just said, Sheila, as importantly, if that customer still needs to talk to an expert or an agent, all of the knowledge of that journey is now passed on to the agent, so the call is completely in context. It's not this, I have no idea why you're calling, what can I do for you? And actually, if you could move to the next slide, please. We've recently completed an implementation at Fortune 50 company. I wish I mentioned their name. It's just one of those situations where you can't, you would certainly know who they are. But the primary goals of this project with the Jacada Visual IVR solution was to quickly enable a much better customer experience and enable a mobile-first culture for the company. Very quick implementation time with these solutions. These are not long and extensive projects. The project went live 8 weeks after signing the contract. And the results they experienced were phenomenal. The contact center is now reporting that they're getting 11% fewer calls. So not 11% improvement, but 11% fewer calls into the actual contact center. So you can imagine what that means in terms of the load for the agents. And 45% of the customers who are offered this digital experience when they initially dial in from the smartphone are accepting that. And this is a new experience, right? So they're calling into this IVR they're used to talking to or punching buttons for, and all of a sudden there's an option to receive a text and begin a digital experience, and nearly half the folks are saying, sure, that sounds like a great idea. In follow-up surveys, 98% of the consumers say that they are extremely or very satisfied with the experience. So not only was it new, but it was something very pleasurable. And not surprisingly, since from the customer's point of view, if you look at the little graphic in the bottom left-hand corner, they've saved 3 minutes. So the typical effort for a customer coming through this particular channel for this function, for this IVR, it was taking 4.2 minutes to resolve the issue. And that's now gone down to 1.2 minutes. So the interaction there's a lot less effort involved in the interaction, making the customer experience significantly better. From a company's perspective, in the first year of implementation of this particular application to support this one business line, they saved over $1 million in support and service costs. So the ROI in the project was somewhere around 3.5 months. And it's gone so well, they're now going to expand it to 3 additional business lines. So again, going back to the smartphone has changed everything. We're now able to offer a much differentiated and much better experience for the customer, taking advantage of the fact that they've got a smartphone. And then from an agent's perspective, provide much more context for that interaction and deflect and defer as many calls as we possibly can to the contact center. So it's a real win-win scenario, and where customers are seeing just a tremendous amount of benefit from the solution.
So it's interesting. I typically think about reducing the customer journey in terms of the number of steps. But when you think about reducing IVR time from 4.2 minutes to 1.2 minutes, or for the length of a transaction, mm-hmm. you can reduce it within a step as well as reducing the number of steps.
Sure, and then provide that all-important context for the agent should they actually have to point through. The agents are finding a tremendous amount of value in that and being able to service the customer and provide a better next best action and all those things.
Excellent. So it's interesting when I hear about the Internet of Things. So it's a huge topic right now, both in technology services circles and corporate boardrooms, but it's already beginning to have an impact on customer experience. And all it really refers to is the number of devices that are connected to the Internet that are providing data that can be used to do any number of things. So when we first think about Internet of Things, it's often this notion of, health devices. And certainly, the health devices were the leading edge of this Internet of Things, and it becoming more people becoming aware of it. And I've got a great Fitbit story, and I'm going to tell it. I was at Dreamforce a year and a half ago, the big Salesforce.com show in San Francisco. And I tweeted, what a time for my Fitbit to fail. I couldn't get it to charge. And you walk all over the place at Salesforce, at Dreamforce. So I'm losing all those steps, right? And just tweeted it out there as a lark. Get an email back within a few hours from Fitbit that says, we understand you can't get your machine to charge. Try this, and we'll see how it goes. So I tried it. It didn't work. I said, but at least they reached out. That was good. That was proactive. I hadn't even reached out to them, so I was pleasantly surprised. I get another email, and the email says, we see you have tried to restart your machine 3 times. You clearly have a defective device. We have sent a new one to your hotel, the Marriott on 4th Street. Because I tweeted that too.
What a great experience.
Exactly. But that's the promise of the Internet of Things.
Yep.
And as this graphic is showing, there's, it's not just Fitbits, meaning there's a project underway to sort of just measure how many categories of devices there are that are connected to the Internet of Things. And it's already up to 2,000 different devices in 73 different categories. And look at the variety there of power devices and force devices and wavelength devices. Mm-hmm. Last week when I was at Enterprise Connect and did a speech, I asked the audience of about 200 what percentage, raise your hand if your company has an Internet of Things effort going on that you're aware of. And I'd say between 20 and 30% of the audience raised their hand. And I think where we are with respect to Internet of Things and the contact center and customer experience is certainly the leading edge has already started, like the Fitbit experience that I had. But more and more, what's happening is in different verticals, different applications for the Internet of Things are being discovered and deployed. And over time, that data should be making its way to the contact center. And I think the onus is on contact center management to be aware of those efforts within the business and understand where that intersection with customer experience is going to come in. So I think we're definitely going to see more and more of that.
Oh, that Fitbit story is a fantastic one. My eye-opening experience was when I had to go into my home router and update it and realize just how many devices. I didn't know what half of these devices were. I look at the list of all these connected devices. I got 4 laptops. What's the rest of this stuff, right? So no, you're absolutely right. It's a tremendous amount of data, and which could lead to tremendous experiences like you had if dealt with properly.
Absolutely. Yeah, what you just said about the router is so funny. The printers, the TVs, the DVD players.
Cable modems, everything.
So I think, we want to bring it back to the Jacada business and sort of understanding that all of these changes, all of these things that we've been talking about impact both the customers and the agents. So what's happening is, as we said, increasingly that first step that a customer takes is not picking up the phone and calling the contact center. It is going online. It may be doing a web chat. In fact, I bought my last laptop from Lenovo completely over chat. Now, from my purpose, just because I am a contact center person, I did that to see if I could, but I did. Went all the way through, got my lower price. I wanted to see, could I be just as happy? And in fact, I was. And so all of those things are impacting how an agent has to do business. And we're really asking agents today to be super agents. We're not asking them to just, deliver a specific number. Did this check clear? Or to provide specific information. How much does this cost? By the time a customer gets to an agent today, it's a complex scenario. My most recent conversation with an airline was, I'm trying to buy a round-the-world ticket to hit 3 different continents. And I did get lost. I did try on the website, but I admittedly got lost. But that's much more difficult than what we would have done in the past when I might have picked up the phone just to buy a round trip to New York, right? Mm-hmm. We don't have to do that anymore. But as a result, we are requiring more of that agent. We expect them to be smarter. We expect them to have that context of, again, the best experience I've had probably in the last month was picking up the phone and calling United in that particular case and having the IVR say to me, we see that you were attempting a trip online. Would you like to continue that? I almost fell off my chair. I didn't fall off my chair because I wanted to tweet it first, but that's what we expect. We expect super agents. Yep. So the question is, how do we create those super agents? So everybody talks about the millennials, right? Well, I love this graphic, and not just because I'm in the big yellow piece of the pie. I love this graphic because it shows that millennials, while an important part of the workforce, are not the only participants in the workforce. And I would venture to say, unless you're a very specific kind of high-tech company or millennial company, that your agent pool mirrors this distribution of generations. And so the onus is on companies to create tools for agents that not only fit the need of that millennial population, but support that baby boomer agent who also needs to look like a super agent when a customer comes in. Even that, World War II silent generation. I'm sure we've all been in contact centers and seen those agents as well. It's funny, I keep saying agent, and I'm sensitized since last week when somebody from Polycom exhorted me to start using the word brand ambassador instead. It's
Yep.
funny, but it's almost not.
Yeah, you're right.
Actually, it's a great way to think about the people that we have on the front line, right? So I am sensitized now. Every time I say that the A word, I feel like I should be saying brand ambassador. I may attempt that. But again, thinking not just about millennials, being able to handle that SMS, mobile, chatting, but allowing and supporting all of the agents to supply support in that same way. Because as we hire, our agents today, we have to think of them as the agents and supervisors that are going to be around, for the next 4 or 5 years. We have to think about what are the skills and the training that they're going to need that's different than that voice agent that we hired as recently as 5 years ago. What tools should we be building now to support the increasingly complex calls that we're asking these agents to be prepared to answer? So I'm going to turn it back to you, David, because I think Jacada has some thoughts on this.
We've got a little experience with this. Yes, we do. So back in 2005, a whole 10, 11 years ago, Jacada came out with the first Jacada workspace, and actually I think we, again, take credit for coining the term unified desktop. We were the first ones at the time doing this. What's interesting is back then, which doesn't seem all that long ago, the need was to take all of these disparate back-end systems, and I was literally in a contact center where there were 27 open applications on the desktop. The agents were having to all tab through to get their job done. It was just mind-blowing to me. It's something I couldn't possibly do myself. But take that complex environment and create a unified desktop, not just a single view of the customer, really a single view of my back office systems, and automate the transactions, automate keystrokes and processes, automate next best action prompts. And it was all really done for the effort to reduce training costs, reduce average handle times, improve the customer experience. But it was, as you had said earlier, it was a single channel phone call. This was just a customer's called into the call center. What do I need to do to help them with this particular request? But an interesting driver to doing this for a lot of companies 10 years ago was what you just mentioned. The workforce is changing. We have millennials and Gen X's coming out that they're not going to walk into an environment and look at 15 different screens, some of which may be green, and go, I can work here. I mean, they're growing up in the Apple world where their experience is sublime on nearly any device they touch. So part of this was a need to get the technology into an environment where they could hire the younger generations to do this kind of work, but certainly to simplify the interaction, to reduce handle times and improve the experience. But now what's happened, if you can move to the next slide, please, Sheila. As we're talking about here is, 10 years later, and this isn't a voice interaction. This is an omni-channel customer. And by the time that call gets into the agent, or if that agent is tasked with dealing with chat and email or text interactions, they now need to manage those channels as well as the applications and the tasks and dealing with the customer and providing excellent experience and support. So they're dealing with multiple channels of interactions. They're dealing with the expectation that the company or agent that I'm going to speak with has an awareness of all of my interactions with that company through all of the various channels. And there's an expectation that I can now collaborate. I may reach you by phone, but I'm expecting to be able to work with you in a collaborative environment. I'm expecting that customer or that company to support me through a WhatsApp-like experience, or to be able to share and co-browse with me to help me through my journey. So the expectations are certainly heightened. And if you can move to the next slide, please. So what we've seen happen is this unified desktop is really now a new omni-channel agent desktop. So it's not just simplifying the interaction for the agent, but it's also now taking all of those channels and slipping them into this unified view of the operational center, if you will, of the company. So a single agent should be aware of all the interactions that a customer's had with the company. They should be enabled to interact with that customer through the channel of choice of that customer. And we've seen agents that can be managing multiple different service interactions at the same time with different customers through different channels. So they are truly super agents at this point to be able to do some of the things they're being asked to do, and the tools need to be there to make the experience successful, to provide the best possible next best action. And the key word here to us, and what we're talking to certainly hear our customers talk about, is context, right? Again, it's that expectation that as a customer, I've been dealing with your company through multiple channels. I expect, the customers you've related, Sheila, or the stories you've related are beautiful in that you get into an IVR and it says, I see that you've done this 3 times. Or you get an email that says you've seen that you've tried to reboot your device 3 times. That's the expectation today, is I have these channels of engagement with a customer. I expect that company to be aware of those interactions. So when I do finally talk to an individual within that company, they should have exposure and visibility to all of that. And then be able to provide me the service that I need. And then that establishes the loyalty you were talking about. It's okay, you care about me. You're following me. You're tracking my interactions with you. And you've provided that information to the individual I'm now speaking with. You care about me and you care about service. And you'll gain my loyalty as a company that way.
So, when I think about technology decisions being made today to do things like you just talked about, David, I think cloud is so top of mind. Last week, as I said, at the Enterprise Connect that Jacada was at as well, at the conference, I was surprised at how strong the cloud story was in terms of the questions that were being asked, the attendance at sessions. Just one data point. Last year, we had a session on Cloud Contact Center and had a nice, 100 people or so show up when there's 5 or 6 simultaneous sessions. We thought that was a pretty good turnout, and we did it again. We did it this year. We filled a room that probably held 200, and there were 20 people standing around the sides, and we probably lost some who didn't feel like standing. So cloud and the contact center are certainly coming together. And, we put this slide in, David and I, to just talk about this notion of keeping cloud top of mind as you make future decisions. Why? Economic cycles. We talked about 2009, 2010, and how investment wasn't made in the contact center. And
Sheila, I think we lost your audio. Are you still there, David?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. I think we have Sheila back now. Let's get her audio connected, and then she'll be back with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Apologies. Power outage here in New Hampshire. Not quite sure why, but everything went black.
Oh, wow.
I assume David did a great job moving us through.
He did.
I just talked about St. Patty's Day. And that's probably why you lost power.
Should I move to the next slide?
Yes,
go ahead.
Actually, we were just talking about, there was a great question about with all these different channels and with the Omnichannel Customer, what type of tools are available and what we need to do to better prep the agents and support the customers. And we had a little dialogue about that. So I think we filled the time well.
Okay. So picking up from cloud, I think, initially we had a lot of contact centers who were at a point where their infrastructure for contact center applications was so old that they were ready to, do a forklift upgrade and just replace everything. Now we're at a point where larger contact centers are looking at the cloud and, have investments that are not ready to be thrown out the window. And increasingly, companies are looking at how do we match what we have in our premises, the licenses, the perpetual licenses that we've bought, and how do we maximize, how do we sweat those assets while still getting the advantages of the cloud. And I think, this mix and match approach is something we're going to be seeing more and more as companies realize that, there's tools from companies like Jacada that can bring premises data and cloud-based information and put it in a digestible format in front of an agent such that you don't have to be all or none. You can just, you can have a hybrid approach in the short term. And perhaps, it's interesting. I also think about having lived through the analog to digital communications equipment phase, and then from digital to IP, and now IP to cloud. Each of those transitions has been about a 10-year transition. And so we would have to expect that the same 10 years is likely going to take to get, more and more things to the cloud, unless something else comes along and things, and even more occurs. So I think a hybrid is a way to think, but having something like a unified desktop that can combine is a great way to have the best of both worlds. So in reality, agent journey management, customer journey management is never going to be all rainbows and butterflies. It's going to take some hard work, and I think the tools are out there to do that hard work and to begin that process. And hopefully over the course of the last 50 minutes or so, -5 on my part, we've raised some of the issues that will help you as you plan out the next steps on your contact center's journey.
All right. Well, thank you, Sheila and David, for your valuable insights on providing a more efficient agent and customer experience through digital transformation strategies. Due to the high participation in the webinar, we're going to answer as many questions as possible from the Q&A window, and the remaining will respond to you individually after the event. While you were away, Sheila, we went ahead and started the poll. So the poll answers are there. I'm going to share those with the group.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
So let's see, the highest, wow, interesting. So 16%, which is the highest percentile, said that their voice interactions are somewhere between 50 and 75%. So actually that's right in with, Sheila, what you were sharing with the data. And 10% said they were less than 50%.
Well, what I think is really interesting here is the 90 to 100% category, where there's nobody answering there. Yeah. Nobody is now saying that 90% of their interactions are voice. So the question is, how do we do a better job of addressing all those digital channels? And one of the points that I didn't make earlier that I'd like to make now is, for several years, we thought the next best thing was going to be either email. No, it's going to be web chat. No, it's going to be video chat. No, it's going to be SMS. And I think what we're finding now is that it's that combination of all the digital channels that's important. You can't just hit one and think that you've got it. You really have to do a good job with all of those channels, and that together, that's what's taking over voice, not any individual one.
Right, and we're seeing exactly the same thing, and the whole this explosion of vendors, Jacada being one of them for sure, that's coming forward with context stores to maintain the data about all of those interactions. It's a little bit of what we talked about while you were dealing with your power outage. It's the customer wants choice, and you talked about the demographics and the different generations. Everybody wants to interact with companies in different ways, and you need to provide them all of those options. But then you need to be able to take their interactions and synthesize them, if you will, into a single view, and be able to take that data and then make predictions from that in terms of what you can do to prevent the calls or to better service the individual when they actually do call somebody. So this whole birth of context stores is completely driven by the multiple channels that we need to make available and then do something about the data we have from that.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. We want to respect the time of our attendees and get them back to their busy day, so we'll answer the two questions from the Q&A briefly, and I'll give one to Sheila, one to David. The first one, Sheila, they ask, what are some best practices for improving the agent's journey that will directly impact the customer experience?
Okay, best practices, it's the word that David just used, context. How do, for years and years we've had this notion of CTI, computer telephony integration, doing a screen pop. the expectations now are so much higher. I think the best practice is going back and seeing what systems are available, what solutions are available to provide more context to agents, because they have to become those super agents. They have to be knowledgeable about the customer journey, and those solutions are available now from Jacada and from others.
Okay, and the last question here, David, I'll throw it to you. It's a good takeaway action question. They ask, how do we begin a discussion of improving contact center applications with management when the philosophy is don't fix what's not broken?
That's a great question. I think it depends on what function is that manager responsible for that you're talking to. Clearly, there's a lot of resistance to doing forklift upgrades, as Sheila said, to back-end systems and legacy systems and such. But I think what they really need to focus on is what is happening to their business if they don't. This goes back to the earlier discussion that Sheila had. If you don't support the omnichannel customer, if you don't support their various channels for interaction and digital interactivity, and then don't provide that contact back to the agent, you are going to be in competitive distress. I mean, there's really no qualms about that. I mean, Sheila shared some wonderful stories. Amazon's the quintessential. Look what they've done to the industry. You have to digitize or die in this environment today. So the conversation needs to be about the customer. I don't think about necessarily the agent. It really needs to be about the customer and what are we doing to improve their success? What are we doing to improve their ability to service themselves, to reduce their effort in resolving their issues? And I think if you're getting resistance from your manager to do something better to improve loyalty and improve experience for your customers and reducing their efforts, I think we need to be talking to a different manager because that's ultimately where your business is coming from.
Well, all right. Well, once again, thank you again, Sheila and David, for your valuable insights. And to the attendees, if there are any questions that we weren't able to answer during today's session, we will respond to you directly after the event. We hope that you were able to gain valuable insight on Omnichannel for customers and agents and how easily you can utilize it to enhance your organization's customer service. A replay of the event will be available soon on Jacada.com along with the download link to the presentation. Once again, thank you for attending today. Please visit us again at Jacada.com and have a wonderful day.